Now we're ready to look at the last of our 6 trig functions, that of cosecant. So let's go back to the unit circle and recall that cosecant theta is 1 over sine theta. And as usual, we'll make some observations, beginning with the value of sine theta when theta is pi over 2 and 3 pi over 2. We'll look at those two first. You'll notice that at pi over 2, the value of sine is 1. So cosecant of theta is equal to 1 at pi over 2. And of course at all coterminal angles. So as we go around the circle, every time we come back to that coterminal angle with pi over 2, we have a cosecant value of 1. Now, for 3 pi over 2 and all coterminal angles, sine equals -1. So cosecant theta equals -1 there. So we remember that. Now also recall that at 0, 2 pi, and pi, all coterminal angles, sine is equal to 0. So cosecant theta would be undefined at those points. In other words, all multiples of pi, we have cosecant undefined. Okay, with that in mind, let's see if we can put together a graph. First of all, let's just examine the graph of sine. I'll do a sketch of the graph of sine, and this is of course between -pi and pi. And once again, looking at the graph of sine the way we did when we were looking at the graph of secant, we observed the graph of cosine. Well, now looking at the graph of cosecant, we'll look at the graph of sine to see if we can glean some information. Now, first of all, looking at the graph of sine between -pi and pi, I've scaled the horizontal axis to be pi over 2. So, for example, from 0 to pi over 2, I've made a little division here, and then from pi over 2 to pi. And likewise, going back the other way, you see the scale is pi over 2, -pi over 2, and then -pi. Now, clearly, we can see that we're going to have asymptotes at pi, 0, and -pi, because after all, that's where sine is 0. Cosecant is 1 over sine. So I'll go ahead and draw those asymptotes in. Now, in addition to that, we notice that at pi over 2, our graph is going to, our cosecant is going to be +1, and at -pi over 2, cosecant will be -1. And keeping in mind that it's still going to be asymptotic to these asymptotes in both locations, the region over here and the region over here. So if we look at the graph, this is what it looks like. Now some things we want to take note of. The domain, of course, the domain is theta cannot be any multiple of pi, any integer multiple of pi. So 0, pi, 2 pi, -pi, -2 pi. Any integer multiple of pi is outside the domain of cosecant. The range from -infinity to -1, inclusive of -1, and then union with 1 to infinity. That is the range of cosecant. And the period, of course, would be 2 pi. As looking at this graph, you can see we are looking at one period here, from -pi all the way over to pi.